Hello, hello. Welcome back. Hey girl, how you doing? My name is Sade, last name Hendrix. And I was wondering if I could take you out, put on the How You Doing pod, and make your head nod. This is our podcast, and you should listen. We got a guest today, so pay attention. Hey, welcome back. We back. I'm your girl Sade.
And I'm Aisha, and this is the How You
You
Doing
doing
podcast.
podcast? Well, friend, another episode, another day,
Yes,
another
yes,
day.
yes,
How you
yes.
doing today?
Feeling pretty good today.
Feeling good?
Feeling good.
How's your week?
Great. It's a great week. I mean, what can I say? I feel like it's still the things. Kids are back in school,
Mhm.
which is so nice.
Right.
They had a good break, but now it's time for y'all to get your asses back in school. So that's pretty good. I'm done training.
Oh, you're
So
not orienting
my
them.
fourth person is 5 MPs. I'm one. 4 times I trained. So I trained everybody there.
Right.
But the young lady gave me a run for my money.
She was
The
bad.
one who just got off.
She was bad.
I'm not saying that.
It sounded like it.
I don't like to say bad. She's an experienced MP, but I'm just
She wasn't catching on.
there you go.
Okay.
The slow bus
Okay.
came across.
A
But
little
God
short.
bless her. She's done now. So you know what that means. Time to cash in. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a great week.
Yeah.
Great week. How about you?
Get that bonus.
Yeah.
And you said God bless her, so that means she was real slow. Because we all know what that means.
Bless your
Where
heart.
your grandma be like, bless his little heart. That means he the slow cousin out the group.
I
But the-
didn't say that. I just
Girl, if you listening,
Okay.
you was moving like a turtle and not in a good way. My week's been good. You know, adjusting, new year, back into work,
Mhm.
doing all the things, working out, trying to eat right.
Mhm. Not trying. You are
Eating right,
Yeah.
you
Is
know.
it dry January or
I'm gonna still drink a little bit.
Okay.
But
All right.
dry with the budget, limiting the drinks.
Okay.
It's ovulation, so you know what that means. Me and Rosalita
Raggedy Ann.
might have a run for our money. No, not bleeding, ovulation.
Oh, so you're ovulating.
That
Okay.
means hump in the air.
Well, wait a minute.
It
All
makes
right,
you
so
horny.
you're ovulating right now,
That means you're
which
horny.
means don't tell the wrong person that.
Oh no, I know, cause niggas be trying to trap me and it won't
Go in
do
the
it.
bathroom,
You
have
better lay
everything
low.
have everything ready.
Everything ready for what? To get their ass. I'm be in prison. Anyway, today we are back.
Yes,
We have
are.
another gym for y'all today. We have a special guest today. This guest is super special to me. This is my sister. But we're going to give her a proper introduction. So we are now introducing my sister, Cletus, the first Dr. Hendrix. You heard it right. You know there's two of us, 1 and 2, but this is the first, the youngest, but the first in the family. My first best friend, so humbled and proud to have her sharing her gifts with our community today on the How You Doing podcast. So without further ado, Dr. Hendrix is a licensed psychologist. She specializes in forensic psychology. She completed her doctorate in clinical forensic psychology at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Dr. Hendrix completed her undergraduate studies at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California, with a bachelor's in psychology and sociology. Alphabet soup all through this thing.
Don't play with it.
Dr. Hendrix is passionate about practicing forensic psychology for a diverse population in order to assist in legal decision makers in better understanding how the acts of behavior correspond with our judicial system. She entails confidence in the strategies, educational skills, and clinical experience. She is an adjunct professor at Angeles College in Los Angeles, where she teaches intro to psych and human development. She has active professional memberships in the American Psychology Law Society, and her forensic interests include youthful offender evaluations, competency to stand trial, and mental health diversion.
Wow.
So if y'all niggas commit a crime and your mind ain't right, holla at Dr. Hendrix for your eval. But welcome,
What an intro.
Cletus.
Welcome.
Welcome to the How You Doing podcast. We're so happy to have
Yay.
you.
So happy to have you.
Thank you, ladies, for having me today. Why I gotta be Cletus? Why you couldn't leave that one out?
Because that's your name. No, we got to do Cletus because we're Norbit fans here. And, you know, Cletus comes from Nutty Professor when they was at the
We
table,
know.
at the dinner table. So they got to know. We give all the names around here. Cleve,
Yes.
we got Norbert over
Yeah.
here, and we got me, the realest nigga there
Oh
is.
God, I was gonna say,
Okay.
what's your name?
So today, the realest nigga there is. So today, you sick, so we ain't gonna keep you long. We appreciate you being here,
Yeah.
stuffy in the cabin with the piano in the back. You know, we didn't know that you did Mozart on the weekends. I didn't know, but I'm glad to figure it out, girl. So we're gonna discuss
That's
mental.
your sister. I don't know what to tell you.
We're
hon.
gonna discuss mental health in the Black community. So everybody, grab a seat, grab your notebooks, because we all know y'all need it. Because the world is very unhinged right now, and we know everyone needs some support. And we are here with Dr. Hendrix to give you the support that you need to be better.
Okay. So I just, wanted to open with what prompted you to get in this field? Sade did a great intro. I didn't know all of those things. So what prompted you to take this route?
I think that growing up, I seen my parents really persevere. Granted, their childhoods, their adversities, their upbringings, and I also seen maybe some of my aunts and my uncles struggle with that same perseverance. And although they all grew up in the same household, it was really different. It amazed me to look at how different their lives turned out amongst 8 or 9 children who all lived in the same house with the same matriarch. Right, my grandmothers were basically single mothers on both sides, my mom and my dad, and so it interests me, like, what makes people different or what makes people who they are, and what mitigating factors or what um, different preventative measures can we take to kind of mitigate some of those things and those adversities, and how people turn out, or how someone can persevere and maybe someone fall victim to their circumstances at the same time. So I was really just interested in the dynamics and the diversity within my paternal and my maternal families on both sides, and it sparked an interest in wanting to go into psychology. However, I actually wanted to be an attorney originally, and so
Hmm.
going into forensic psychology was kind of the best of both worlds for me to bridge that gap between the law and also the human psyche. So that's kind of how I landed where I am. And I also did terrible on my bar exam the first time. So I was like, maybe that's not the path I want to go.
You mean the LSAT, girl?
Yeah, exactly. I never got to the bar. I was
The
speaking
LSAT.
that into fruition. But yeah, no, the LSAT. I did terrible on my LSAT. I like didn't study. I was struggling. I was kind of in like a speaking of, mental spaces. I was just in a crazy space and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my career after my undergraduate studies. And I thought I wanted to be an attorney. So I did study and take the LSAT, and I kind of changed my plans after that.
Well, last episode I did discuss a little bit of how sometimes what our goals are is not the same as what God want or intended for us. So it's just nice that you didn't quit altogether. You were like, I'm just taking a detour. This is not where I'm meant to go. Perhaps it's not that you quit, because look at you. I mean, and look at the work you're doing for your community and the community around you. So I think that that's a blessing that you kept going, and now look at you. So it's commendable.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. I was just gonna ask, as a mental health professional, what would you say is the importance of mental health, especially in the minority community?
So I kind of want to jump back to what Maisha just kind of said too, um, about like not giving up, right? I think in the minority community, especially in the
Mm,
Black community, we are trying to
right.
break so many
I don't know if she
generational
can.
curses and um, chains, right? So the stigma attached to mental health, I think, is the most detrimental thing in all minority communities, especially Black and Brown communities. And we, especially in later generations, we came from such a negative stigma attached to mental health, or that, if you ask for help or you need help or you need medication or whatever the case may be, you're crazy, right? There's such just like
Right.
negative connotation when it comes to mental health. And I think for starters, like, we have to break the stigma that is attached with just the need for help and the ability to even understand what mental health is and tapping into your mental health. We come from cultures and communities where that's not even a thing, right? The strong is the strong. You do what you got to do to survive. You're living almost in a sense of survival. And it's such a difference when you change that depiction of, growing up and living in survival versus love and pouring into yourself and your mental well-being. And I think to get there, the first thing we have to do in minority communities is break the stigma. It is okay to not be okay. Two things can hold true. You guys speak about that a lot in the other episodes. Like, two things can be true. They're not mutually exclusive, right? You can be strong and you can feel weak. You can be strong and you can cry. You can be strong and you need help. And so breaking that stigma that because I need help or because I'm depressed or I'm anxious or I'm struggling with something that maybe other people aren't struggling with does not mean I'm crazy, does not mean there's something wrong with me. We can all benefit. We all need to prioritize our own mental health and our mental well being. And in Black and Brown cultures, that hasn't been a thing. So this is new. We're all kind of learning how to tap into our mental health and how to prioritize our mental well-being. It's very new, I think, in our cultures, and it's very new to, you know, I know me and, sis, we've talked about it, right? Getting our parents to go to therapy, or even as a professional psychologist, going to therapy myself, right? There's nothing
Sure.
wrong with tapping into your mental health and prioritizing your mental health. And that's the first step that we have to do in our cultures. We have to change that stigma that mental health is tied to crazy or mental health is tied to something being wrong with an individual. We all need to prioritize our mental health, every single person.
Amen. And I'll tell you one thing, and I spoke about this on previous episode was, I remember being either going to middle school or maybe in high school and I wanted to go to therapy. I knew something wasn't right with me. I didn't know how to, express it per se, but I knew I wanted to talk to somebody. And my dad's like, "Oh, that's for
Mhm.
crazy people." I'm in therapy now. I can actually say that. Um, and I just started going to individual therapy. I was in couples therapy, but they recognized like, hey, you need to tap into this. And my mom's like, well, what are you seeing a therapist for? And I'm like, I need it.
Right.
Like I feel like you need it too. Like we all need it. Like it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad I feel like that stigma is still there
Mhm.
unfortunately, but it is not a negative thing. It's because I'm trying to be active, just like, I'm not going to wait to go see a primary care provider. I'm going to be preventative with this. I'm going to check in. And like you said, two things can be true. I can be having a horrible time, but I can hold space for myself in these other situations and I can keep it together. But inside, I am
Right.
dying. So I love that you spoke to that. You did cut out initially when you started talking a little bit, but I think we have the idea about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say as well. I think that it is important to stress, like you said, in the Black and Brown communities, there's such a negative denotation with therapy. Even now, when I tell people, I mean, clearly, when I first told mom and advocated, she's like, "Why are you going to therapy?" Because I'm on fumes, baby, and there's nothing that you can do to help me. There's nothing you can say that can make me feel better. And sometimes outsiders, even though they know you, they can't tap into what you're feeling because sometimes they're the ones who cause that pain. They're the ones who cause that trauma. And a lot of the times when you express that to your parents or siblings or any relationship, people, of course, are offensive and defensive because they love you and they care about you and they feel attacked. But it's like, it's not for you to be attacked. This is my journey. And this is something that I'm working through. And I need someone who may have not been there to let me know that how I'm feeling is valid. So I think, like you said, we need to deviate that negative cognition with therapy. But how, as someone who works in that field, how would you recommend that we do so in these communities? Because we're both in healthcare, we both are working on the more of the physical aspect. But there are patients who come to you and be like, especially in Maisha's realm, where they have weight loss, which is addiction, but a lot of the times that food addiction comes from trauma. So how
Mhm.
do we be better in introducing therapy and introducing mental health to people who may have had that negative cognition with it in the past?
Okay, so there's That's a pretty loaded question, but I want to start
Right.
with the fact that another thing that's very common in our communities is speaking of like Maisha's profession and weight loss and things like that, right? Using food as a form of a coping mechanism, right? We self medicate, right? Because of the stigma that is attached to mental health and that lack of a safe space to even explore, your mental well being. We learn to self medicate. And self medicating can look very different and, across the globe and across individuals. But rather that's food, rather that's substances, rather that's in risky behavior, rather that's in social media now, whatever that looks like. We learn to self medicate with these unhealthy coping mechanisms to deal with what we're going through. And so in our community, I love this new this new little trend going around, right? We listen and we don't judge. I think that as individuals in the field that you're in, and just us in general, for our friends, for our family, um, you want to be able to actively listen. You want to be able to provide a safe space for people to even tap into that vulnerability and be open to even, um, speaking to a professional about it. Sometimes we need a third
Mhm.
party, right, who doesn't really know us, who can really listen and not judge. When we watch this little trend, we see these people, they're listening, but they're judging, right? And they're laughing or they're making comments. And I mean, that's the community that we live in. People need a safe space to be vulnerable. And sometimes when I'm introducing therapy, it's not so much as that something's wrong with you or you're even going in for a diagnosis or anything like that. You need a third party who doesn't know you, who's not going to judge you, who's going to provide you with a safe space to explore whatever it is that you need to be vulnerable about. And sometimes, as friends and family, or even professionals, we don't have that capacity to do that for all of our loved ones. And that's something I want to tap into for all of us, even as a professional. We need to pour into our own mental well being and understand the capacity that we have for others, but more importantly, for ourselves. I can't fill up your cup when my cup is empty, and vice versa. And so that's why, you have to prioritize your own mental well being, even you guys as professionals. When you're in that space, you can't talk about things that you're not willing to do or try. Both of you guys are now in therapy. Both of you guys know what it means and have had lifestyles and childhoods growing up in this community, in minority communities, and how you've navigated that for yourself. And I think your own self reflection, your own self experience is how you bring other people into that realm. And get them to understand that, hey, there's nothing wrong with me because I need to talk to somebody, or maybe I don't want to tell my mom about this, or maybe my mom is the one who's caused me this trauma, like you stated, or my sister wouldn't respond this way. I mean, you just have to make it okay, to not be okay. And that hasn't been a space that many minorities can fit into, right? You
Mhm.
always have to wear the strong suit. You always got to keep going. You always got to make it happen. And like Maisha said, there can be days where you show up to work, you're smiling, you're showing up here in front of me today. We got it all put together, and we don't. We're dying inside. Um, and so I would just suggest to really work on actively listening. As friends, family members, professionals, we listen to respond most of the time. We don't listen to understand. It's very rare that you listen to someone and you're truly listening to understand where they're coming from. You don't care about what you're going to say back. You're not here to give advice. You're here to provide a safe space to listen. Actively listening is really hard, and that's why it helps to go to therapy, because
Mm.
that's something you learn as a professional. I've learned that in my professional realm, how to actively listen. I don't do it in my personal life all the time, right? Sometimes it feels exhausting for me, or sometimes I feel like I give in this, profession, that in my personal life, I don't always take my own advice. So I think that we all can just do better by learning how to actively listen, um, and providing safe spaces for people. It's very rare, especially the world that we live in now, especially with social media and just the times that we live in, that people have a safe space. So I would start there. I would start there, even in your professions, just providing people with active listening. You're not trying to respond, you're just providing them a space to be heard. And when you're heard, you're felt, and you're understood. So it's hard
I think
for sure.
Right.
I think that's good because I think we both have touched on, especially when we are talking about our toxic episodes about how we both listen, but we want to say something. Like I'm gonna get my point across, and I know that I have that real bad. Like I'm listening to be like, okay, well, that ain't what I would have said, or that
Yeah.
what I would have did. But
Yeah.
then it's also like you don't like when it's done to you,
Mm-hmm.
and
It
we,
feels shitty. You're
yeah,
like, wait a minute,
and
I don't like the way that
we
felt.
both have talked about how instances where we weren't vulnerable is because we didn't feel like those safe spaces were created for us. But I think we all can agree, professionally and personally, that sometimes we are the ones not creating those safe spaces as well.
Yep.
So that is another reason, like you said, to advocate for therapy. Because even in our own lives, being self aware enough to know, hey, if you tell me something, I can't listen and not judge.
Mm-hmm.
I might be listening, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, what you got going on? So maybe I'm not the person
Yeah.
you should be sharing that
Yeah.
vulnerable moment with,
Mm-hmm.
because I can't give you authentic advice because I'm giving you advice from a place of like, that ain't no shit I would ever do.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what the person is coming to you for. And I feel
Yeah.
like in therapy, you can say that. You can say, I engaged in risky behavior or I did this, and they're not
Mhm.
judging you. They let you let it out, and then they validate, okay, I understand why you might have done that,
And you
you
know
know?
what? It becomes a
I
repeated
do.
cycle because, thank God you two are self aware, right? And we're doing the work, right? Healing, not healed, right? It's a continuous journey. But when you do respond the way and when you do respond that way or you do judge someone, it shuts them down, right? And then that becomes a
Mhm.
repeated cycle. That person is not going to feel that they should be vulnerable. That person is not going to
Yeah.
ask for help. That person is most likely going to continue to self-medicate and to use their unhealthy means of coping, because when they tried to get help or when they tried to be vulnerable or express themselves, it was met with, negativity, right? And that's not going to push me to want to, talk
Mm-hmm.
again or be open or express myself or deal with the trauma or process what's going on, right? It becomes a repeated cycle, right? And that's why we see generation after generation where these chains aren't broken and where the same generational trauma is continuing to be repetitive, and
Mm-hmm.
people aren't getting help, and people aren't, because like you said, and it's okay, that's the other thing. It's okay if you can't provide that space for that individual. You gotta again prioritize your own mental well-being too, and your own mental health. Sometimes we don't have the capacity to provide that space. That is how and why we want to continue to promote, just people tapping into their own mental health, rather that looks like therapy, rather that looks like, exercising or finding healthy means of coping, whatever that may look like for that individual, because we won't always have the capacity to provide that space, and that's okay too, right? You got to tap into yourself as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we talked about respecting our own boundaries and not giving where we can't. Like, stop going from a place of,
Yeah.
you know, don't show up in spaces when your cup is not full. I know that you work in forensic psychology. So for some of people who may not know, this is a double question. Can you explain like what that looks like? And because you deal with people who have committed crimes, forensics, due to mental illness, do you believe like early detection in mental health may have deviated them from maybe doing some of those behaviors, or do you feel like it's important, to know that maybe something's not right before it gets to a place where they have to see you?
Yeah. So, first, let me just explain a little bit, yeah, about forensic psychology. Um, so when you're licensed, you're always going to be licensed as a clinical psychologist. However, forensics basically is that bridge between the law and human behavior. So for me, my niche was always at risk youth. When I first got into the field, though, I worked with women coming directly out of prison and jail. And then I went into the juvenile halls, a specific camp for more traumatized or, the severely mentally ill adolescents. And then now I'm actually in administration, speaking of mental health. And I'll tap into that at the end of this question. But nonetheless, forensics, you're going to work with the forensic population. When we think of forensics, we think of like jails, we think of prisons, we think of law. So you're thinking you're working directly with the courts. How does human behavior tie into criminal behavior, right? To start this question, we have to look at our justice system and know that our justice system has been built on white supremacy. Our justice system has been built to um, a repeated cycle as well, right, for the benefit of this country that it was built in. And so we're not a country on restorative justice, we're a country on punitive justice. And so the jail system and the prison system, and anyone who has family who's unfortunately been in the system understands that it sets you up to repeatedly go back to the system. It is not rehabilitative, right? You're not going to tell someone to go to jail, give them a felony, and then it's damn near impossible for them to get a job when they get out of jail and think that they're not going to go back to criminal means to survive and take care of their family. It's not a system that's set up in our favor. Um, on top of that, it's a system that's built to uh, unequally or unproportionately um, put chains on our black and brown communities specifically, right? So we know that black and brown individuals are overly populated in our justice system. And so I would say that 95% of the individuals that I do encounter are Hispanic or African American, 100%, right? So on top of that, you have that disadvantage there for our minority communities. And then we get into that layer of mental health and the cultural stigma attached to those minority communities, which means that probably 90% of those individuals did not get proper mental health treatment or care in their childhood or their adolescence, because not only was the book thrown at them, they're seen as a young black or brown individual who's just another criminal, who's just committing crimes. And it's never even been a question to tap into the trauma, to tap into the upbringing, to tap into the ACEs, right? So those are the adverse childhood experiences. That's what ACEs stands for. And that can be secondary trauma, right? Maybe you had a parent who was incarcerated, maybe you had a parent who experienced some specific trauma that then trickled down to you and your siblings. So no one taps into any of that. You're looked at as a black or brown criminal, and that is how you're treated, and that is how our system continues to treat you. And once you're into the system, you're going to repeatedly show up into the system because that's how it's set up to be. um, but 100%, if we really did tap into the mental health or into preventative measures, then recidivism would go down significantly. So one of my favorite evaluations that I like to do is mental health diversion, where the attorney actually does hire me or a psychologist on the panel to complete an evaluation that says at the time of the offense, this individual's mental health directly affected their behavior, right? And so instead of putting this person in jail where they're not going to get any rehabilitative services, probably still be using in jail and increase their criminogenic thinking, let's try to tap into what's really going on and address the mental health diagnosis to see if that then changes the behavior, right? If this individual got individual therapy, medication assistance if needed, and so forth, would the behaviors that were responsible for the crime in the first place decrease or change? Now, the sad thing is that this is happening 30, 40 years sometimes into these individuals' lives. I'm getting a 60-year-old man who's been in and out of prison his entire life, who has, an extensive criminal history, and now he's only learned to self medicate. And so these drugs now are even different, right? I always say like meth, and they're hell of a drugs. And so it's not as easy to just change
Mm-hmm.
learned behavior, especially when it's 40 and 50 years. It's very unfortunate that maybe this individual never got those services when he was an adolescent, or, when he was, first showing those signs of depression and anxiety. And on a small tangent, depression and anxiety, psychosis, it looks completely different in black and brown communities than it may look like what you've seen on TV or in the psych hospital. A young child who's aggressive, who's angry, who might be irritable, who may be doing poor in school is a depressed child in a black and brown community, not a bad kid, not a kid he's acting out because he does not know how to express his feelings, and he doesn't have the space to do that in the home. And his environment has taught him that violence or aggression or this type of behavior is how you handle these situations and how you express yourself. It does not mean that that kid is not depressed and anxious. Now, if that would have been tapped in when he was 12 and 13, when he first started showing that aggression and that irritability, these are all signs in the DSM of depression. People think depression is you're sad at home crying, eating ice cream. That is not depression in the Black and brown community. Depression can look very different. For a Black woman, depression can be overworked. Depression can be going to work and working yourself till you can't no more, because that's how you deal and cope with everything else. And you're truly depressed. You don't even know how to tap into that. You don't even know that you are depressed. You think you're surviving. You think you handling business because that's all you know. So I mean, it's such a loaded question because there's so many layers of really tapping into mental illness in the Black community to really address these generational problems. We come from a history of slaves where mental health was not even a thing, where you were used and abused. That's what our lineage is built on, and that was normalized. And by the grace of God, we took spirituality as a means of coping and dealing and surviving. But I mean, sometimes that's not enough. You have to understand what mental health looks like in your community to even tap into it. But to go back to your question, preventative measures is key for everything. I also used to do ABA therapy for children who have cognitive, and developmentally disabled, specifically autism. And preventative measures has always been key for anything that we're dealing with, for substance abuse, for mental health, for weight loss, for health care. You guys know this. Preventative measures is key. You need to fix the problem before it happens. You need to employ these healthy means of coping and healthy habits before you fall off the wagon and you become, severely depressed or you end up hospitalized. We see bipolar a lot in the Black and brown communities because what is bipolar? You have these highs and these lows. You self medicate. You start engaging in more risky behavior, doing maybe a hypomanic or a manic episode, and then you end up arrested or hospitalized. And not until then do we finally get mental health services. And in jail, that means giving somebody meds so that you can shut up and be quiet, but you're not really tapping into the trauma or what all you've been through and saying, oh my God, I guess I have been depressed since I was a teenager. And I didn't even know that that's what depression looked like. I guess I was anxious and maybe I smoked weed because that's what helped me calm down and be able to go to social settings or to be more chill. But really, you were dealing with anxiety,
Sure.
So I mean,
Sure.
it's so many layers. It's so many layers, and we're so heavily,
Mm.
overly represented in the justice system, in the Black and brown community. And definitely, it's always a co-occurring disorder. Always, always, always. Rather that be a substance abuse and mood disorder or something like that, and that is usually driving a lot of the criminal behavior. And so it's really hard. It's really hard. Don't get me wrong. There's bad people in the world, right? We have people who, may be antisocial or really are criminogenic. But I would say that 90% of the individuals, at least 90% of the individuals that I come across, have a co-occurring mental health disorder with a substance abuse disorder, which is really driving their criminal behavior.
Wow.
Mm.
That was a lot because I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
crazy. It's crazy you said bad because Maisha spoke on that about how she hates when people call her bad as a kid. I know Jasmine, as your sister, you hate that as well because
And even my
your
daughter,
daughter.
she my mom calls her Billy for Billy Badass. So,
That's she's quite the
she's
smart.
something, but she's intelligent.
She's
She's
but
going to
Jasmine
be my
laughing because that was
That
her
was
performer.
me.
ass.
She's going to be my performer. I don't know what she's going to do, but even like man, my husband, we speak about it, we're like, I don't know what she's going to do, but she's going to do something
Right.
great.
She's gonna be
She has a
smart
different
Yeah.
like
personality.
this one.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, because you was bad as hell. I mean, you were
I
quite
find that so hard to believe.
you were quite the child. It's not hard to believe I lived with her. But clearly, she's smart. And like you said, you were
Yeah.
probably acting out. You did have a tumultuous relationship with mom, of course. So a lot of those behaviors were probably attention seeking and to get that because I
Mm-hmm.
was considered the golden child, which I'm sure Nyana, me and
Yeah.
her are very similar. Like she's very chill, she's very calm. The other one's like, hear me roar.
Yeah.
But it's probably because, like you said,
Yeah.
she's so chill. And she's gonna sit, she's gonna do the things, and the other one's like, hey,
Look at me.
hello,
Yep.
I'm
Yeah.
here too.
Mm-hmm.
There's two of us. So
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, I feel like a lot of people, you've even expressed like you felt like you were depressed in middle school or
Mhm.
something wasn't right, and you didn't have that safe space. Your parents are like, "You're
But
good."
to get a diagnosis at the age of 38 when I got it is crazy.
Right.
You know, shame on me for not doing my own due diligence. Like, I've been living this way for so long and just coping in these negative fashions of doing these things. I didn't have the high risk behaviors, but it wasn't always healthy patterns of
Right.
Cope.
how I cope with my
Mhm.
depressive symptoms. So, I feel like now I'm working on that.
Right. But
Thank
you're
God.
more aware.
Yeah.
But again, like Jazz was saying, like having that space and
Mhm.
preventative, I don't think, especially like she brought up in the Black community, we go after the destruction has come. I didn't go
There
to
you go.
therapy till I was in school, and I felt like I was losing my fucking mind. Like
Yeah.
I was in a dark place. I
You
didn't
knew
know.
you weren't
I
okay.
didn't know what depression was. I don't think I was depressed as a kid, but clearly when we wrote those letters to ourselves, there were some things that I was dealing with that I've never spoke of, that I never tackled. I
Yeah.
just went through life. Like I said, I can't take compliments. That's not okay. What is
Yeah.
wrong? What's wrong? If
Mhm.
I'm always trying to achieve these body goals that I've already had before. And then
Mm.
when I had them, I didn't want them. I wanted something else. So clearly there's something wrong that you don't feel like you're good enough.
Mm.
But you don't know that until we took the step.
The
But
mask that we put on.
but like she said, it's so important, and I hope people listening know how important it is when you first feel those things. It shouldn't crash and burn. Like
Yeah.
I feel like we both went to therapy once we were crashing and burning. I
For
was
sure.
crashing. Like I knew something wasn't right, and I knew I needed to get help. But it's like clearly I've been feeling things clearly since a kid,
Oh
since
yeah.
Bell's palsy. That's 7th grade. That's
Mhm.
11 years old. I
Mhm.
didn't go to therapy time, well, 33, 34, where I felt like, look, God, I'm in a dark place. I don't know left from
Mhm.
right. And I just, not that I didn't want to be here, but I'm dark and
Mhm.
it's scaring me. So now I'm going. But it's like, had I went in 7th grade, maybe
Who knows?
when I
Yeah.
had a life-changing, altering event and maybe talked that through, I would have been better at coping. You know,
Right.
like I feel like the gym is a healthy habit now, but at first it was not because I was doing it because I didn't like how I looked. I was using it to cope with, as Jasmine likes to diagnose me with, my body dysmorphia. But
Mhm.
I used to get very upset about it. But now I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, because my goals now are what I want to have. But I was that way. I'm like, I was that small and I still thought I was
But
fat.
Mm.
I don't think that you could realize that until what? You prioritize yourself and tap into yourself and understand that you love who you are. Like, you had to
Mm.
love you before you could see that it wasn't just a goal, it wasn't just a habit, it wasn't just something you were doing, but you were really unhappy with yourself and you were addicted. So you can have positive and negative addictions too, you know? And so, like you said, you can turn also unhealthy habits to healthy habits as well. People look at the gym and you can over exercise, right? But I don't think until you
Mhm.
came into this space where you truly loved yourself that you were able to tap into that and be like, okay, maybe it was body dysmorphia. Maybe I did think I was big when I was little. Until you have that self awareness, you're going to keep justifying poor behavior. And that's
Yeah.
what we do when we self medicate.
Oh,
Until
people
we
do
get
that.
the self awareness and we tap in,
You need that
you're
justification to kind
correct.
of keep going.
Yeah.
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 But it's so hard to get that self awareness, and it's so frustrating once you have it to be in spaces with people who
Don't.
don't.
Yes.
Ooh, that's
Because
tough.
you're so like you said, now I'm aware. So if I hear someone down talking to themselves, just what I told Maisha last
Mhm.
episode,
Mhm.
try this exercise of loving on yourself and being nice to yourself. I did it and it was bullshit at first, but it became a regimen and I actually started to believe it.
Mhm.
So it's like when you're around people who justify maybe being mean or being non-supportive or not listening to you or being nasty to you or being talked down to you or whatever
Or
the case.
sweeping your
And there's
problems under
yeah.
the rug,
Right. Then
right?
you're like,
Yeah.
hello, it's right there. The red flags, the paint, the writings on the wall.
Yeah.
But people are not self-aware. And I think for me, it's frustrating as
Mhm.
someone doing the work. And I know for you, because we've discussed it. But that also leads me to a question for you as someone who pours into people daily. That's your
Mhm.
job. Your job
Yes.
is to understand what people are. But again, you're human. You might have it all together on that camera or wherever you're talking to these people, then you get off in your shits and shambles. So how does pouring into other people's mental health affect your own mental health?
I tell people all the time, like, the only way to get through a job like this, especially in forensics, I'm hearing the worst of the worst. There's so much vicarious trauma. Like, I don't put anything past anybody, right? So to keep my own sense of humanity and my own self-care, I really do prioritize my self-care. I really do um, live a whole different life outside of Dr. Hendrix. I am two completely different people from Dr. Hendrix to Jasmine Lachey Hendrix. I am a whole different person, and I'm okay with that. I love when people are like, "Oh, well, you're a psychologist. You should be this way." I don't have to be shit. I have to be
Correct.
me, and I'm okay with that. I know who I am professionally. I know how I pour into
Mm,
people. I know that I'm damn good at my job. And so how you feel or what you see me outside of that is I don't care. I know who I am. I know who I am as a professional. I know who I am in my personal life, and I prioritize my personal life. I love to travel. I love to have fun. I love to chill and do nothing when I feel like chilling and doing nothing. And that's hard. It's hard to make that space for yourself, but you have to. You have to make that space for yourself. I cannot go to work and pour into anybody if I am not in a good space myself. And so that's
true.
part of my professional self care too, is that I have to take care of myself to be able to take on the job that I have. I have to. You guys both know that as
Hmm.
well, being in the medical field. When you are dealing
Hmm.
with life and death every single day, and somebody's life and death is on the line, maybe with this report that I'm writing or my testimony or whatever the case may be, I need to make sure that I'm good, period. So you have to prioritize yourself, and sometimes that means having firm boundaries. That sometimes that means understanding your capacity and when you have the capacity and when you don't. And even in the professional world, there's cases that I won't take. There's things that I will not do. I know my boundaries. I know what
Hmm.
space I'm in mentally, physically, and that's why you always have to be tapped in. Now, there's something I wanted to go back on about when you're self aware. Being self aware, even in the professional world, right? It's hard to sit in a space where you just want to be like, look, like you said, there goes the red flags, or all you got to do is do this, or all you got to do is do that. I think that when you finally prioritize your own mental well being and you truly are continuously working on your own self love every day, you learn how to tune out people that are just not there. You learn how to
Mm,
like not let those things affect you the way that they used to, um, because you know who and what you are, and you've put in a lot of work and a lot of time and effort to be where you are and to be self aware. And
Hmm.
so, understanding that journey is to know that that journey is hard and that everybody may never get there and that people may still be going there. And you have to make the decision for yourself if you're going to still be friends or still hold this person in your space, knowing that this is who they are and this is where they're at. We have to stop like
mm,
loving people for who we want them to be or their potential to be. You need to love people for who the fuck they are right then, right there, right now. And if it's something that you feel like it is now taken away from your own mental well being or exhausting
mm,
or draining your own space, there goes a decision that you have
Yeah.
to make, that either this is who they are and I'm either going to deal with them in this space and be able to compartmentalize and separate that and love them for who they are, or I need to remove them from my life because they are no good to my own mental well being. That's really
mm,
hard. But when you get there, it becomes easier because you know who and what you are, and you know how to compartmentalize, sorry, your spaces where you can kind of, like, I know who my mom is. I know there's certain things how my mom's going to respond. I know that my mom comes from a different generation. I know that my mom may not be in her same healing journey as I am. There's certain conversations where now I'll laugh it off, or I won't even give feedback because I know where it's going to go. That comes with your self-awareness. That comes with you learning and healing. And so my mom is my favorite person in the world. She's my number one lady. There's still certain things that I may not, agree with or like her responses to or things like that. And I've been able now to understand that those things will not affect me or my day or my space anymore. I know where my mom is.
Mm-hmm.
I love my mom for who she is, wholeheartedly. Best mother in the world. Granted, all her flaws and mistakes, but I had to come to that realization for myself. There's certain people in my life where I've come to the realization where it's like I know who they are wholeheartedly, and I cannot have them in my space, right?
Mm.
Because they're detrimental to my own mental well being, and I have to remove them. Friends and family, all the same. We have to learn that too in our communities. It doesn't matter if they're
Yep.
family. I don't care if they've been your friend for 25 years. When you start to prioritize yourself and you really love yourself, you will find out,
You lose a lot of
who's on that
people,
same page with you and who's not.
and you lose a
And you
lot of
will lose a
people,
lot of
and then
people, and
Mm-hmm.
that's tough. And that is why a lot
the
of people
people
don't
you
want to
love.
tap in. They don't want to deal with the trauma. They don't want to become self-aware because their whole life and their whole circle and everything that they've known it is going to change. It's going to rock their world.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, and that and
But
that
it already
Oh,
has in a lot of
100%, but they don't
instances.
see
yeah,
But
that, right? They're still
yeah.
yeah, and
justifying
Mm-hmm.
the poor relationships, the
and
poor
they
behavior, and really their world is already rocked. Crazy.
and they're never
Mm,
going to see it. Even when you take a step out, someone who is not self-aware is going to rationalize why it was your
reasoning that you
reasoning
took a step
behind
out.
your
Right.
departure, and not that, hey, maybe
Yeah.
how I present myself may be
Affected it.
detrimental to their
Right.
mental health, cuz God forbid that they did anything. But like you said, that the onus is not on you.
Sure.
And I spoke on that last episode. If you are working on you and you start with you, then you can't try to justify someone
Correct.
else. Like if you want to tell everybody it's my fault that we're not friends or we broke up, go for it. Because
Mm-hmm.
in my mind, I know what you were doing was not helping me be a better me, and I had to choose
Right.
me,
Mm-hmm.
as hard as it was.
And I
Yeah.
I say this to say that, it doesn't mean that some of us, even in our own self-awareness, might not be a little delusional. And that's where professional help really does help you step in because it takes time, it takes a journey for someone to sometimes just listen to maybe you are the problem or you're part of the problem. Or like for me, right,
Mhm.
my anger or my temper,
Yes.
I can always justify why I need to cuss the motherfucker out or hit them up beside their head. Always. I can always find a justification in my
Wait
head
a minute.
to do that, right? It
Because
took
she's
me to
that's
have to
Mike
tap
Tyson.
in and see that, like, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no. I don't want to be that person for me. I don't want to have somebody to have that much power or authority on my mood and my behavior
Mm-hmm.
where I'm willing to lose it all, right? I'm a whole licensed professional. I've
Right.
worked very hard to be where I'm at. To get into an argument with a Karen or somebody on the street, why should I let you have that much power and authority? I don't care if you think I'm a bitch because I walk away. I don't care if you think I'm this or you think I'm that or I think I'm better than you. Whatever you think. I know that I've worked on me and who I am, and I know who I am, and that's the only opinion. God and God's opinion of me and my opinion of me are really the only ones that matter at the end of the day. Um,
Yeah.
And and I want to go back to something you said, Jasmine, 1 second. Is so what's the you mentioned that you know who you are as Dr. Hendrix and you know who you are as Jasmine,
mhm,
right? So I want to know because that was like one of the biggest things that I went into therapy with. Is like, what do you want to work on? And I laid it all out there. I'm like, I don't know who the fuck I
mhm,
am. I have no idea who I
mhm,
am. I know I'm a mom, right? Because that title was given to
mhm,
me. I know I'm a wife because that title was given to
mhm.
me. I know I'm a daughter and all these things, right? I know who I am professionally. For so long, I held on to who I was professionally. But now I'm like, well, who are you? Are you a bad person? Are you a selfish person? And I'm looking at some of these things. It's like, you really might have some of these qualities. So, how did you approach knowing who you were with those separate hats that you wear?
So I think that's another common occurrence in our culture is we have to wear hats, masks, whatever you want to call them, but we play many
Mask,
different
yeah.
roles, right? And in a society where people say, you're fake or you're this. It's like, who am I then? Because I am different as Dr. Hendrix. I tell all my friends, like, yeah, you're a mother, but you are Maisha before you were a mother. You're a woman. You are you, right? That is not just your whole existence. And I think as parents, that's another thing I've talked to clients about, right? Figuring out who you are when you become empty nesters or things like that. But long story short, I think
Mm-hmm.
that you have to sit with who you are in all of those roles and all of those masks and all of those hats and be okay with it. Sometimes you may
Yeah.
present selfish, and that's something that you learn that, oh my God, maybe I am a little selfish and that's something I want to work on. Sometimes I may present very hot tempered and angry. Oh my God, that's not who I want to be. But I'm okay with sitting in that space
Yeah.
and realizing you're hot tempered and you're angry, and this is something that you want to work on. Too many times we're putting on the mask. We're putting on the mask and we don't sit with it. We don't sit with
Hmm.
these different roles to really figure out who you are in this role, but more importantly, who you want to be in this role. Life is a
Yeah.
continuous journey. You're not, I don't know who I am. I may be someone different today than I am tomorrow, or at least I want to be better. I want to be different tomorrow than I am today. And
Hmm.
so being able to really be vulnerable, I think vulnerability is the key to figuring out who you are. You have to be vulnerable to be
Love
able to
it.
sit in the negative and the positive spaces. You can't hide behind your career. You can't hide behind being a mom. You can't hide behind being a wife. You got to look at, who is Maisha and who am I even in those spaces, right? And what characteristics do I like and what characteristics that I don't like? And is this who I truly want to
Hmm.
be? And then once you figure that out, you strive every day to just try to be your authentic self in all of those different roles. We do have to play different roles, and I'm not going to be who I am as Dr. Hendrix as I am as Jasmine. I'm just not. I'm a completely different person in a
Yeah.
professional realm than when I'm out shaking my ass on a vacation. It's completely different, and that is okay. And I'm
Yeah.
okay
Valid.
with
And
that.
that is absolutely
And I'm
okay.
okay,
Yeah,
and I
that
don't
is
Absolutely
care who
valid.
okay.
has to say anything about that because I've sat in that. I know who I am when I'm on this trip, and I know who I am when I'm testifying on your father's behalf at court, you know? I
Right.
know who
Love
I
that.
am, and I'm okay with both of those.
That
And in this world, in my profession, a DA could make, why I have my pages private. I don't post certain stuff on social media, stuff like that, because that those worlds can cross over. You have to be okay with it all.
right.
Hmm.
Not to cut you off, but we're strapped for time. So we just want to do one, if you can just give us one tip or one takeaway that our listeners can listen to, or a resource or tip for mental health, especially in the minority community.
All right. I think my one health tip would be to pour into yourself, prioritize
Mhm.
yourself. In a world where we, want to be everything that we can for everybody else and for others and our kids and our families and everything else, if you are not pouring into your own cup, you really can't fill anyone else's. And so, I think especially in our culture, being strong, always handling business, always putting others and maybe the others' well-being before our own. I urge everyone to just tap into their own mental health and prioritizing them, right? Make this year, we're at the beginning of a new year, make this year about pouring into you. And I promise you that will carry over into your friendships, into your children, into your partners, into your families. Pouring into you and making sure you're okay and prioritizing your own mental well being to start that journey on self awareness. It's a lifelong journey. But if you start today, right, we're healing, we're not healed. So that would be my
Love it.
tip.
Amen. Well, we appreciate you so much for
Yes.
these
Thank you
wonderful
so
gems.
much.
And of course, we can talk about this for hours, so we'll definitely have to have you back and do a part two.
Please.
I'm just going to close out with our Dizzle deposit. So, my mom would always say that a mind is a terrible thing to waste. In this episode, we understand the importance of nourishing your mind through recognition and the realization that you may not be okay or you may not have it together. Understanding that believing in God is also believing in growth. Sometimes you need outside sources to help flourish your mind, body, and spirit. Seeking therapy is never negative, it's only a complement to water the garden within you. Your mind supplies your body with nutrients, your heart with blood, and your spirit with wholeness. Don't allow the darkness and the weight of the world to diminish the light that is intended to exude outside of you. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to lean on the word is God on the word of God, as well as lean on professionals to help you navigate your thoughts, control your capacity, and enforce healthy boundaries. I pray to whoever is listening today that if you feel that you are alone and you do not know where to turn, this is here to help you. There is nothing wrong with you. We see you, we hear you, we're praying for you that you take the step to become a better version of yourself. Your mind is your command center. I pray that you understand that God has the final say, but he also depends on you to speak up when your command center is being compromised and seek help to gain control. Mental health is more than a fad, it's more than a saying, it's a lifestyle. You give what you put out, and I'm praying that today you take the step to put out vulnerability and shed the armor and allow yourself to breathe and receive the help while accompanying the word of God. You're not alone, and you do not have to navigate the world by yourself. Be true to you, do the work, because you're a work of art in God's eyes and in mine too. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Jasmine Hendrix. Jasmine, I appreciate you so much. And we also want to say thanks to our listeners. Until next time, we want you to stay healthy, curious, but most of all, be inspired. And remember, we always ask others how they're doing, but don't forget to check in with
How you doing?